O Christ. First, I just want to thank Pastor Sal again for inviting me to be here. I was here this summer, and I know this is such an amazing community, and it's just such an honor to be here to share a word with you this morning. If you would be with me in a spirit of prayer. Come and fill our hearts with your peace. You alone, O Lord, are holy. Come and fill our hearts with your peace. Alleluia. Amen. So who remembers that 1960s TV show, Mission Impossible? Where the show always started out where they'd get this reel-to-reel tape. How many people remember reel-to-reel tapes? Cassettes. Bleh. So this reel-to-reel tape would show up, and they'd put it on this thing, and it would run, and it would always start out, your mission, should you choose to accept it. And it would tell them what they had to go do, and then it would say, and this message will self-destruct in 5 seconds, and then the tape just went, poof. Never messed up with the machine. What is that? But anyway, so that was Mission Impossible, and then the team would go, the super secret spy agency would go, and they would do some spy adventure, and then all would be right with the world. And how many people remember the late 70s, early 80s show, Mork and Mindy? At the end of that show, Mork, who was from the planet Ork, would always check in with his planet folk, and he would say something that he learned in that episode about the foibles and quirks of humans on Earth. In our scripture reading today, the Transfiguration, Jesus is radiant, and he meets Moses and Elijah, and Peter then tries to hang on to that moment so hard. He's like, oh, I'll make you some booths. It'll be awesome. But then poof, it's gone, and then you get the voice of God. Listen to him. Listen to him. And for some reason, only Luke suggests in this text that Jesus was talking to Moses and Elijah about his departure. In the Greek, the word is exodus, which means departure, but I think Exodus has a little bit of a ring to it from the Old Testament. But this reading feels sort of like a combination of Mission Impossible and Mork and Mindy, because in one way, Jesus is touching base with his other chosen of God, with Moses and Elijah. These are the big people in his tradition, but he's also getting his mission, should he choose to accept it, from them. They're talking about his departure. They're talking about his exodus, about what is to come when he goes to Jerusalem to face his death and resurrection. As we've heard a couple times already this morning, Transfiguration Sunday is always the Sunday, the last Sunday of Epiphany, before Lent starts. And we can kind of think about Epiphany as Jesus' coming out stories as a fabulous prophet and teacher, not just a prophet and teacher, because there were lots of prophets and teachers before him, but as a fabulous prophet and teacher. He's so fabulous that at his birth, the Magi, the wise ones, find him because of a star. Who else has a star? He's so fabulous, he has his own star. And then his baptism. When he gets baptized, the voice of God comes. Has anybody had the voice of God come at your baptism? Wasn't at mine, as far as I know. They would have told me, I'm pretty sure. So he's so fabulous that the voice of God shows up at his baptism. And then, and I'm kind of going through the gospel stories that we heard this year at Epiphany. The next one was the wedding at Cana. A wedding so fabulous that they served the best wine last because Jesus turned the water to wine. That's his first miracle. He comes out as a miracle person. And then over 2 weeks, we heard about the story where Jesus preached in the Nazareth synagogue. Now, this one doesn't feel so fabulous because, the first week it was, hey, Jesus is awesome. He's teaching us a new thing. And then they turn on him when he gets a little snarky. They want to throw him off a cliff. And that's where the fabulous part comes in, because he just walks right through this crowd that's about to throw him off the cliff with the same fabulousness that Billy Porter had at the Oscars this last weekend. So this is me, and I'm moving. And then he calls the disciples. And he's so fabulous. He says, follow me. And these people are willing to walk away from their jobs. Would you do that? And then the last couple of weeks, we had the Sermon on the Plain. And this is important because the plain is level. The Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is one up. And like Pastor Sal mentioned earlier, the mountain has this metaphor of being up above. And Jesus in the Sermon on the Plain is so fabulous. We are all in this together. I am with you, you are with me. And so then today, we have the Transfiguration, where Jesus is so fabulous that he actually glows. So the Transfiguration is always between Epiphany and Lent. Epiphany gives us a snapshot of Jesus' early teachings, early ministry, and Lent gives us the narration of his end of his ministry. It's always the pivot, the liturgical pivot, where he gets his mission, should he choose to accept it, to go down to Jerusalem to die and be raised. And so his mission, he's chatting with Elijah and Moses to discuss his departure. And this also kind of feels like, if you've been in corporate America, that final strategizing session that you'll have with the key stakeholders right before the big product launch, or the site goes live, or the new service is being offered. There's that last one where everybody meets together and they're like, okay, this is how it's going to work, and is everybody in place, and yada, 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 and then at the end they go break, and then this thing happens. It kind of feels like that too, as Jesus talks to Moses and Elijah. Because right now we're about halfway through the first half of the liturgical year. You know, the first half is from Advent to Pentecost, and then the second half is from Pentecost to Advent. First half is where all this stuff happens, and the second half we kind of get a little, okay, this is cool, but there's not all the, and now it's Advent, and now it's Epiphany, and now it's Lent, and now it's Easter, and now blah, blah, blah. So we're like halfway through the exciting half. This is where the beginning ends, and the end begins. We've gone through Epiphany, and now we're going to get ready to go to Lent. So Jesus' mission, as we know, is to go to Jerusalem, die, and be resurrected. This is about halfway through the Gospel of Luke as well, and some people say it's a little foreshadowing of the resurrection with the dazzling clothes and the glowing. We don't actually know what Elijah, Jesus, and Moses talked about, but it could have been how the Passion plays out. But the thing that we do know is that Jesus accepted his mission. We do know that he went to Jerusalem, he died, and he was resurrected. We know how Jesus' mission played out, but Peter, James, and John don't. They are right in the middle. So when Jesus told his followers, follow me, it doesn't say anywhere there's like, well, where are we going? Nobody says that. And Peter always feels like the foil in the stories about Jesus. He's always the fall guy. He's always the one like, hey, yeah, I'll do it. And then he kind of looks stupid. Right? Like when he walks on the water, yeah, I'll come with you. And oh my gosh, what am I doing? So they're heavy with sleep. For some reason, they're very tired. It doesn't say why. If this is an all-night prayer session, we don't know. But they're heavy with sleep. And maybe this is a foreshadowing of the Garden of Gethsemane as well, where it was, stay with me an hour, why can't you stay awake? But then they're awake enough that they notice that Jesus becomes radiant. And I wonder, was he also humming? Was there a noise as well? And then Elijah and Moses show up. And Peter, because he's half awake, he's been trained when there's things that happen, you offer hospitality. So that's his go-to. He's like, okay, well, let's make some booths for all y'all. But as soon as he does that, poof, they're gone. And there's this voice that says, listen to him. And then they don't talk about it. How could you not talk about that? I mean, seriously, this huge thing happens, and now you just don't talk about it. In the other two Gospels, Matthew and Mark, Jesus specifically says, we're not going to talk about this. But in Luke, we don't get that. He just says, they didn't talk about it until after the resurrection. So Jesus has one mission. Peter, James, and John have another one. Jesus has to go to Jerusalem. Peter, James, and John have to listen to Jesus. But what about us? What's our mission if we choose to accept it? Well, I think we also have to listen to Jesus. But the thing is, Peter, James, and John, it was fairly straightforward. Jesus was right there. They could hear him. It was pretty easy. And if they had follow-up questions, like, what do you mean by this? We are not so lucky. In our Hebrew Bible reading this morning, we also heard the story of Moses coming down from the mountain and glowing so much from speaking with God that he had to wear a veil. People were freaking out, so Moses had to wear this veil so that they could be not so freaked out about it. When I was in seminary, I was having dinner with a friend and former coworker, and I was talking about something that was going on in seminary or with the church or something. I don't know what I was talking about, but he's like, you know what? Clearly you are on this right path, because every time you talk about this stuff, you get so animated and so alive. You never were like that talking about data stuff. Go figure. I don't know. Unlike Peter, James, and John, we know the end of this story, and we can share that story. We don't have to keep it on the down low, whether Jesus tells us to or not. We can share God's brilliance with all the people that we come into contact with. So our mission then is to listen and then do what makes our face glow so much with the love of God that people get uncomfortable about it. So what gets you wound up about that? What gets you so wound up about the story of God or God in your life that you would glow, that you would be that excited? Is it feeding the hungry? Is it welcoming the visitor? Is it visiting the sick or in prison? And is it calling out truth to power? Is it being in solidarity with women or people of color, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, disabled folk, poor folk, unhoused, immigrants, folks with mental health issues, the environment? You have a wonderful poster right here if you need a reminder. In case you're like, I don't know, something will come to me. I know that Douglas UCC is already ahead of the game in a lot of ways. You guys do amazing things in the community and here in your own community, but also in the larger community with the environment, with people being welcome. This is a fabulously welcoming community. So I know you guys get it, but what can you do to up the game? What can you do to make it even more exciting? What are you going to do to go, well, I'm interested in saving the environment, and then move to being so interested in the environment that you're wound up all the time about it, and it keeps you up at night? How do you make that jump? So in this time of Lent, where we become more pensive and insightful and thoughtful, what is it that when we get to Easter will just burst out of you to the point where you're so excited that the love of God, and you cannot not share the love of God because you're radiating it, because you glow, because it makes people uncomfortable that you are so excited about sharing the message of God. So this Lent, let's choose our mission. Let's accept our mission to the point that it makes our face shine with the love of God. Amen.